Well, this week's What a Week, we've whittled down to David Shapiro and myself. Kruger and Lindsay Williams are missing in action, but they will be back. You'll have a full complement back next week. David, let's start with your sense of the market right now. And I did notice your tweet with regard to the telecommunications stocks, MTN out with a trading update, and starting to really fire on all cylinders. But you did put out a comparative performance. Talk me through your thinking there.
You know why that's so relevant is that I think we've almost lost a view of where we were. And we're suddenly getting very excited about turnarounds in companies. And that makes it hard to understand because, last year we know was a very awful year. It was a terrible year in which trading almost came to a halt. The problem is that we're trading again now, but we've got to work out how sustainable this is. I thought the MTN result was a very, very good result because if you went through it, in all divisions, it was doing well. I'm particularly interested in the mobile money. And then I thought, it's creaming it. It's doing so well. And when I did the comparison, I said, hold on a sec. Over a 3-year period, it's just caught up to where Vodacom is, and Vodacom has done nothing. So I'm going through that same exercise with a lot of local companies. And in fact, it applies to global companies as well, trying to establish now that we're coming out of COVID, now that the economies are starting to really look strong, where's the next leg? Should we get carried away with where we are now, or too carried away, or should we just take a step backwards and try and work out, okay, what's this going to look like 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line? And I think particularly in the local market, that's the challenge. It's very easy to write headlines for the kind of results that are coming out now, but you've got to look at it in context of where we were and where we're going.
Look beyond the headlines, and as always, we say look beyond the short-term news flow. Yeah. And then also, David, just on the horizon, potentially could still be Indian variant of COVID-19, third wave. I just don't think we're in a position where we can say all is clear and it's full steam ahead.
Absolutely. And I think it's a massive worry. Even in areas where they have opened up. And yesterday I was talking to my brother in Australia, and he said to me, everything's fine. Theaters are opening, restaurants are opening. Overnight, that changed because a few cases broke out in certain suburbs in Sydney. That's where he is, in Australia. And they've gone back and say, you have to wear masks, and they're starting to restrict crowds as well. So I think it's going to be part of our lives. I see Broadway's opening up on September the 21st in New York. It means full theaters. But I think you've got to be a brave person not to have plan B in place, because I don't think COVID is going to go away, just like the flu doesn't go away. I think variants are going to come and go, and we're going to have to adjust lives for a few years to come, until it's completely eradicated, if they can do that.
So, the theme then would still be, and we keep talking about them, the technology stocks, the FANG stocks. There's this hybrid reality, and again, this is a theme that we've spoken about repeatedly, is that virtual is always going to be a part of our new normal. And we're
comfortable with it. I think everybody's quite comfortable with it as well. I think it's also going to take on new dimensions as well. Because we fast-tracked the use of technology, because we've been forced to use it. And, we were talking about the example that you're going through of tracking who watches the show and when they decide to nod off or not nod off. We've never been able to do that. And I think if you extend that to e-commerce or to all other elements of business, data, the use of data in a good way, not in a bad way, not in the negative way, I think is going to be very much of our lives. And those are going to be the companies that we're going to use that analyze the data. So I think, I still think that with COVID, even disregarding COVID, I think we're in for a very exciting time in technology development, in the way that we we live our lives as well. So I'm not put off. I just think that there's some very bright times ahead.
Business is a connection, not a location. And I think that perfectly sums up where we are. So business is a connection, not a location, which begs the question as to whether, cities, as we know them, as business hubs, need to exist for the sake of business.
That, not for business, but I think for life. I think people still want to go to the theater. They, I happened to meet someone in a Starbucks last week, and it's a local Starbucks. It's not the US Starbucks, because I'm here. And I looked around there, and every table, because they give free Wi-Fi, had someone sitting with their Wi-Fi. Now, I don't think it's a free Wi-Fi. I think it's an excuse to have people around you and to be part of a world. So even though they're operating in their virtual world, they're still conscious of being part of something else, of a society and that. And I think it's still very important, particularly for children. I think children, we can't live virtual lives. And that, from my point of view, I've learned valuable lessons from COVID, from lockdown. Is that, number one, I've developed new connections, completely. So the connections that I used to have, and even doing programs like this, coming in touch with you and Lindsay and Mia, Joanne, and
Nick.
Nick, sorry, I forgot Nick. He's going to kill me. I forgot his name. And Nick, you're learning, and because you're getting different views, which we didn't used to do. So it's very important. And I continue to progress and to look into the to the themes. And Bronwyn, there's so many themes that are starting to come through and are going to be big. And which we have to be aware of and keep talking about.
Will you give me a sense? So, I don't want to keep you long this morning. It's just
fine.
Those themes, I think it's really important that we just perhaps set out the themes that, and we have repeatedly, but again, highlight those themes for us as you and I take to the podium.
You know what's coming through, and I was reading Mark Cutifani's talk at his AGM, the virtual AGM that they held in London, and the chairman's statement in that. And what comes through strong is clean air. We can call it hydrocarbons, or the elimination of hydrocarbons and elimination of carbon emissions, whichever way. It is becoming so dominant. I know we're starting to sound boring, and we're starting to sound like 1960s hippies, with these kind of, with all this dogma, but it's big. And businesses have to position themselves for what's going to be expected from them and that. So if you read that statement, you'll see how important it is and how it's going to influence the way that businesses change or produce things as well. So for me, it's going to be the most dominant theme. With it comes all kinds of other technology, battery technology, green tech, all of those things. So I think when we talk about infrastructural development, that's going to be, I think, prime, foremost as well. Along the way, there are other areas, that fall into that. But I think it's going to be a very, very dominant force in the way that we carry on. And that comes with all the other technologies, from 5G to the cloud. The way that we're looking at the way the information you get is all cloud-based technology. The use of data, yeah. And so we can go on. And there again, we come back to, so what about these older companies? How do we look at some of these older business? I know that they're giving value, but one's got to consider whether they're going to make it down the line. And that's where I say my confusion's coming in, trying to understand where these businesses will be, even though they're making headlines at the moment.
So there was I did a very interesting discussion for PSG Consult lately, and we pulled in some international fund managers. And one of the themes is that is now starting to be spoken about regularly, and it probably really suits what you're saying, is that traditionally we've had the class of growth versus value. Now there's almost a third element that has crept in, and that is the accelerator. There's another class which are beyond growth. These are the accelerators of the future. And perhaps that's just something, as we continue with What a Week, perhaps between Lindsay, Mia, myself, and you, we can start looking at some real opportunity in this space, those accelerators, in the renewable energy space, in the technology space, etc. But exciting times, David.
They are. And what one must do, and I'm saying, go back 10 years, go back 20 years, see what used to dominate the indices, or what were the top companies in the major indexes. And now if you look, you'll see how things have changed. And there's this whole discussion, oh, it's only 10 stocks, it's only 20 stocks that have made the run. And that's right. That always happens. And the challenge now is to look for those next 10 stocks, 10, 15 stocks, which you call your accelerators, which I like. You know,
and then one other thing I want to share with you is Michael Jordan. I love this tweet. He said his daughter, who is close to finishing school, said to him, well, you know, can you give me some advice in terms of jobs, etc.? I may be kind of paraphrasing it in my own way. But Michael responded and said, you know, that was one of the most difficult questions to be asked, because the jobs that he would need to advise on actually don't exist yet. They are still to actually come to fruition.
Yeah, you don't know. No, that's dead right. I think that it's hard to advise young kids, but I certainly think that technology and science is going to dominate. Medicine and those are going to be the dominant themes that I think are going to attract a lot of the clever people away from the algorithm or algorithmic hedge fund traders. You know, I think that was very 2010, 2020.
Well, it's a big, brave new world, David, and we're all writing the new rule book as we go. So, as I said, we'll regroup with the rest of the team next week. Thank you so much for joining me. David Shapiro, Sasfin Securities.